So, all right. Well, in that case, I'll call the meeting to order. Could we have a roll call?
Yes.
And it is 7:01.
I'm showing 7:03.
7:03.
Yeah.
I'm at a bad angle.
No worries. Ms. Billman,
Here.
Mr. Fell,
Here.
Mr. Allred,
Here.
and Mr. Fitch.
Here. We do have a quorum. So do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
Okay, we have the minutes from the December 10th, 2020 Plan Commission regular meeting. Are there any motions in regards to the minutes?
I will move to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Bell, second by Mr. Allred. Are there any discussion of the minutes? No. In that case, we have to have a roll call vote on this. So if you could, please.
Absolutely. Mr. Allred,
Yes.
Ms. Billman,
Yes.
Mr. Fell,
Yes.
and Mr. Fitch.
Yes. Minutes are approved. Do we have any communications? We don't have any continued public hearings. We don't have any old business. We do have a new public hearing. We have plan case number 2415 SU 21. Request by Trinity Lutheran Church for a special use permit to allow operation and expansion of a church at 701 East Florida Avenue in the R2 single family zoning district. So if you could, Mr. Ricci.
Absolutely. I'd like to say that we are supposed to be being joined by David Keene tonight from the Trinity Lutheran Church, as well as architects Elsa Riefsteck and Charles Riefsteck, who will present the design. Two corrections I would like to make to the staff report are staff recommendations for conditions to the special use permit, which I will provide shortly. The church has operated at this site since 1954 and must reconstruct its fellowship hall to address health and accessibility concerns. And are you all able to see the presentation screen? Okay, thank you. Sections 6A3 and Table 5.1 of the Urbana zoning ordinance allow a church in the R2 district with a special use permit. The Plan Commission must review the special use permit application, hold a public hearing, and make a recommendation to the City Council. The City Council must then approve with certain conditions, or deny the request. At this time, staff recommend the Plan Commission recommend City Council approve the special use permit with conditions. The following two conditions were omitted from the staff report: combine the 4 existing parcels into a single parcel and install a sidewalk along East Sunnycrest Drive. I wanted to provide those at the beginning, that way you'd have them in mind as you heard the presentation, as if they were there in the original staff report. Trinity Lutheran Church has operated at this location since 1954, when it constructed the original fellowship hall. Around 1960, the property and neighboring properties were annexed into the city with a zoning designation of R1 single and two family residential. At that time, churches were permitted in all city residential zoning districts. In 1967, the church constructed the sanctuary and education wing. In 1979, the Urbana zoning ordinance was amended, separating the 1 single and two family residential zoning district into 3 residential zoning districts. This same amendment also made churches a special use in R1, R2, and R3 zones. This shift from permitted use to special use allowed existing churches to continue to operate as legally non-conforming uses. However, because they were now non-conforming uses, these churches could not be expanded. To expand, the church must be brought into legal conformity by obtaining a special use permit. The church campus lies on the southeast corner of the intersection of East Florida Avenue and South Anderson Drive. The parking area here lies east of the buildings with a single egress onto East Sunnycrest Drive. Nearby uses include Wiley Elementary School to the north. Table 1 in the staff report summarizes the current zoning, existing land uses, and 2005 comprehensive plan future land use designations. Looking at the zoning, the property and properties to the east and south are zoned also R2 single family residential. Properties to the west are zoned R1 single family residential, and Wiley Elementary to the north is zoned conservation, recreation, and education. It is flanked by R3 single and two family residential zoning districts. The future land use designation for everything south of Florida is residential. North of Florida is also residential, except Wiley Elementary itself is flagged as institutional future use. The existing campus is comprised of the 1954 Fellowship Hall, which covers 7,200 square feet across 2 floors. The 1967 Sanctuary and Education Wing, which has 10,270 square feet, and a 28-space parking lot. Regular church activities include 2 weekend services, a 1-week vacation Bible school once every year, weekday preschool and daycare, and an annual weekend rummage sale. The Fellowship Hall is currently split level and is not fully accessible to people with mobility issues. The existing kitchen in the Fellowship Hall does not meet Champaign-Urbana Public Health District standards, and the hall has recently become unusable due to general decay and the recent discovery of mold. Let's go to a site plan. Okay, this is the original site plan that was submitted. The proposed Fellowship Hall would be a single story of approximately 6,540 square feet. Therefore, it would have a larger footprint, but would have 600 square feet less total floor area. The new design would correct both the accessibility and the decay issues. It would provide the same functional spaces as the current hall and would have a CUPHD approved kitchen. The parking lot would approximately double in capacity to 55 spaces, which is the minimum parking required for a 273 seat sanctuary. So essentially, they would not be increasing the parking more than what the existing church is already supposed to be providing if it were constructed to today's standards. On February 18th, church staff hosted a virtual neighborhood meeting. The church staff mailed invitations to all surrounding property owners, the same list that city staff are required to use to announce the public hearing. 13 people attended, including 5 church staff, a city planner, and at least 5 who identified themselves as neighbors. Concerns that were expressed included no screening of the expanded parking lot from the east and south neighbors, people using the parking lot as a cut-through, dumpster screening, and parking lot lighting. Design staff then did make revisions to the site plan to address these concerns as well as to meet zoning requirements. So going back, directing your attention to the site plan, we've got Florida to the north and Sunnycrest to the south. There is currently 1 egress off of Sunnycrest approximately here. The initial site plan proposed to shift that egress to the east to increase the buffer from the preschool drop-off, and then also add on an egress to the north side of the lot exiting onto East Florida Avenue. There would have to be some tree removal throughout the lot, including 1 city tree in the right-of-way here along Florida. They already proposed to add screening along the east side of the lot, but there hadn't been any provided along the south side. Staff also hadn't seen that during the initial review. So with this input from the neighbors, as well as recommendations from staff, a new site plan was submitted, which is what was included in your staff report. You'll note that there is, and this is what it looks like, and let's call out what the changes were. A landscape hedge along the south side of the parking lot was added, as well as the head-in parking spaces along the east side of the parking lot were rotated 90 degrees so that it would eliminate the headlight glare into the east neighbors. The staff report does address how the proposed special use permit meets the 3 criteria. And I'll flip to the rendering here that was provided. This is based on the revised site plan. We have the existing sanctuary and education wing. This is the site of the new proposed fellowship hall with the east-west parking and the egress onto Florida and onto Sunnycrest. The staff report addresses the proposed special use permit and how that meets the 3 criteria. The church will continue to be conducive to the public convenience at this location. It's been here since 1954 and has become an established piece of the fabric of the neighborhood. It's convenient because of its location at the intersection of 2 collector streets, the bicycle lanes along East Florida Avenue, and there are also sidewalks along East Florida and South Anderson and nearby CUMTV bus stops. The church would continue to be operated so as not to be injurious or detrimental to the R2 zoning district. No changes are proposed to weekly services or daycare preschool activities, nor is any increase in congregation or school enrollment expected. The proposed larger parking lot would likely reduce on-street parking on nearby residential streets during church services. The addition of an egress on the north side of the parking lot would likely distribute traffic better than having just one access point and result in fewer cars on Sunnycrest Drive, a residential street, and also improve internal circulation on the site. Both the fire department and the police department are in favor of the additional egress as well. The parking lot's circulation pattern has been offset to reduce the likelihood of cut-through traffic, and the existing Sunnycrest egress would be moved east to buffer it from the daycare drop-off zone. Screening of the parking lot will also be provided along the east property line and south parking lot line as required by the zoning ordinance. And finally, the special use permit would bring the existing church use into full conformity with the regulations and standards of the R2 zoning district. The preliminary site plan has been reviewed by city staff, and the design team has made these minor revisions to the parking lot design to make it fully compliant with the zoning ordinance. The findings are summarized in the staff report. The 2 main highlights are that the church opened in 1954 outside City of Urbana Corporation limits and later annexed into the city as a permitted use in the R1 single and 2-family residential zoning district. Later zoning amendments changed the zoning to R2 and made church a special use in this district, rendering it a legal non-conforming use, unable to be expanded, repaired beyond ordinary maintenance or reconstructed. And finally, the requested special use permit would bring the existing legally non-conforming church into full legal conformity, and the proposed expansion would conform to the regulations and standards of the R2 zoning district. The Plan Commission has the following options in Plan Case 2415 SU21. Recommend approval of the special use permit to City Council without any additional conditions. Recommend approval of the special use permit with any conditions deemed appropriate or necessary, or recommend denial of the special use permit to City Council. If the Plan Commission elects to do so, it should articulate the findings supporting its denial. Based on the evidence presented in the discussion above, staff recommends that the Plan Commission recommend approval of the special use permit with the following conditions. Construction must be in general conformance with the attached site plan. They should combine the existing 4 tax parcels into a single tax parcel. They should install a pedestrian sidewalk along East Sunnycrest Drive, and they should restrict the Florida Avenue egress to right in and right out traffic. Couple of points about those 2 recommendations. We did talk about this twice at our interdepartmental meeting with Public Works and the Engineering Division. The replatting of this from 4 lots into 1 lot, as well as the reconstruction on the site, would trigger the requirements of the Subdivision and Land Development Code, which does call for sidewalks on both sides of residential streets. In addition to that, just the expansion of the parking lot and the likely increase of pedestrian traffic along the parking lot, it made sense to staff to recommend adding in the sidewalk so that people getting out could walk along and come into the church, or leaving the church, they could come out and come in rather than everyone cutting through the parking lot. And then with the right in, right out egress, staff were concerned about traffic stacking up on Florida, waiting to pull in to the lot, but also traffic coming out of the church, cutting in front of eastbound traffic on Florida. So they thought that as a safety measure, adding in the right in, right out as a condition was a good idea. That is the end of the staff report. I'm happy to answer questions. I can't tell who is here from the church to, let's see, let me look at the participants.
Looks like we have the Reef-Sticks and Mr. Keene.
Yes. So Mr. Keene and the Reef-Sticks are here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ricci. Are there any questions for Mr. Ricci? Mr. Fell?
Yeah, Marcus, I don't have the drawings open or handy. The difference between the parking lot originally presented and the parking lot as revised, what's the difference in the number of spaces provided?
There was no change in the number of spaces.
Okay.
It's still 55 spaces. They eliminated the tree median in between the 2 long rows of parking spaces. I believe some are being converted to compact car spaces, but they kept the same number of 55 spaces, which is the minimum parking requirement for the sanctuary of this size.
Okay, great. That eliminated questions 2 and 3, so thank you.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you, Mr. Fell. Mr. Allred?
Yeah, Marcus, just a few questions. So that new drive on Florida, the access way, that ends up being fairly close, and I can't tell the exact dimensions with the drawings that they provide, but fairly close to the property to the east on Florida, 705, I think it is. I don't think there's any restriction or specification in the zoning ordinance about spacing between drives, but is that something that was raised as a concern, or does that seem like it's acceptable?
We looked at the neighboring house, and the east neighbor actually has their driveway on the east side of their property. So it isn't like the neighbor has their drive on the west side of their property. So that should eliminate the concern about access drives being too close to each other. The drive is next to the west side of the neighbor's house, but there is the intervening required screening separating the access drive from the house.
Okay. Second question. So the parking lot seems to roughly double in surface area, impervious paving, I imagine. I assume this is going to be reviewed for compliance with any sort of stormwater management
Yes.
requirements, but I was just concerned. I mean, the parking lot seems like it runs directly up against the lot line in some areas. In some areas, there's a little bit of a buffer strip. Was there any consideration or concern about where that water is moving to across the parking lot, if it's going on to adjacent properties, or is it is there a plan for containing it on site somehow?
So yes, there is always concern about that, and something that staff on the development review team discussed. And you're absolutely right. This is step one in the process. It still has to go through the full plan review process, where it will go to Public Works and Engineering. They will review and verify the drainage calculations that the applicant's designers provide to make sure how much on-site stormwater detention will be required. Yes, it will be doubling the size of the parking's impervious area. There's the additional impervious area from the new access drive going to the north, and also even the fellowship hall is a larger footprint. They know that they are going to have to do on-site stormwater detention. There still is, I'm going to share the screen real quick. There still is a fairly good amount of open space that can be used. I've discussed with the reef checks, potential for rain gardens, bioretention. We have a fairly large area to the south that could be used for bioretention, outside of the preschool playground. There's this area to the north as well. As far as, the buffers between the parking lot and the property lines, the zoning ordinance requires that it actually allows pavement to go up to a property line, but no parking can happen within 18 inches of a property line. This proposed design actually keeps the parking lot pavement to the same standard as a principal structure. So there's a 5-foot buffer between the property line and the parking lot. They aren't, it looks like the pavement is going to this rear property line here, but we have, the waste enclosure, we have a storage shed, so no parking will be happening along here. Does that answer or address your questions?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Anything further questions for Mr. Ricci? Ms. Billman?
Was any effort made to retain the trees that are there now? I know there are quite a few just to the east of the chapel.
So I was at the site and saw that I think there's probably 5 fairly large mature trees where the new fellowship hall will be, and also here also on the east side of the property. They do appear to be in the development area of the fellowship hall and the parking lot. So I'm fairly certain that those will be slated for removal. They will be adding new trees to meet the parking lot shade tree requirement. It does appear that the trees to the north of the sanctuary, as well as a tree on the extreme southeast corner of the lot, a mature tree, is going to be retained there.
Okay, then I guess the answer to my question is no, there wasn't an effort made.
I will leave the determination about the effort made to the Riefstecks to respond to.
Any further questions? I do have one. I guess I read the memo. There's a conditional use permit on this property to allow the daycare,
Yes,
and this will not affect that conditional use permit. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Ricci? Okay, well, let me explain the rules for a public hearing. The petitioner will have a chance to address the Plan Commission, and following that, anyone in favor of the proposal will be allowed to address the Plan Commission. Following that, anybody opposed to the proposal can address the Plan Commission, and then the petitioner will have a chance to summarize their case one more time, and then we will end the public input portion of the hearing and discuss and possibly vote. So is someone wish to address the Plan Commission on behalf of the petitioner? And I don't have a hand raising thing. Let me see. There's a *6 to unmute.
Oh, I can hit allow to talk for the three of them. So looks like Mr. Riefsteck and Elsa Riefsteck have unmuted themselves.
Okay, great. It's a Zoom meeting. Thanks for your patience. Okay. If one of you would just like to, identify yourselves and then add any commentary to what city staff has done. And then we had a question, I think, from Ms. Billman.
Marcus, this is Dave Keene. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. I'm the chair of the building committee of the church, and I'm prepared to talk a little bit about how we engage with the neighbors and the community, but I don't want to take a lot of time in doing so. But let me at least list what I'm prepared to talk about if anybody has questions about that. We have a preschool, we have a rummage sale, we have Vacation Bible School, we have what's called a pumpkin patch, we have a live nativity. I imagine most of you, maybe all of you, have seen that. We have live animals and manger scene, and a big part of that is that we invite the public into our fellowship hall for our food event. We also have what we call a backpack program with Wiley School, and we supply food for typically 8 to 15 families. We fill up backpacks free of charge, and that goes on year-round, even in the summer. So if there are any of those items that you want me to talk about more, I'd be happy to do so. But I want to emphasize, though, Marcus already told you that our current fellowship hall is in very serious disrepair. And because of that, we had to close it for permanently. We cannot use it anymore. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, we were not able to use it anyway, but we do use it a lot for our own church activities, plus most of the activities that I just listed for you. For example, we have the sales for the rummage sale in the fellowship hall. So even when we get back to a more reasonable state of affairs, barring any long-term kinds of issues with the pandemic, we will not be able to use the fellowship hall because it's closed for safety reasons. So we really do need to replace it. And I just wanted to emphasize that. And I'll answer any questions that anybody might have about any of that, but I defer technical aspects to Chuck and Elsa.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Keene? No? Thank you, sir. And if the Riefstecks, both of you want to address us? Please do.
Tyler, can I ask, do the speakers need sworn in? Or is that just later in the proponents and opponents?
We typically do not swear in people.
Okay.
It's not part of our bylaws.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. We'll trust them to tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I think
So-
Elsa is going to speak on our behalf.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you.
So hello, my name's Elsa Reefsteck. I am the project architect for this project. And I guess I'll just start by giving a brief summary of the project so far. So we met with the church several years ago about remodeling or replacing their existing fellowship hall. And that's because there are several issues which Dave and Marcus already kind of explained with the existing fellowship hall. We found that it made more sense financially to demolish the existing fellowship hall and construct a new building. And that would give us the opportunity to have this new addition be on the same level as the existing sanctuary and education wing, to create better accessibility throughout the building. It would also give the church a chance to create a more inviting fellowship hall and a more functional fellowship hall to meet their needs. So like Marcus explained, the existing fellowship hall is multi-level, and we would be, in this new addition, we would be adding on similar use spaces as the existing fellowship hall. And the area would be, the approximate square footage would be about the same as the existing fellowship hall, but since it's all on one level, it would be take up a little bit more area on the site. So this addition would also allow the church to expand their existing parking lot to meet zoning requirements for the size of the sanctuary. It would also give them the opportunity to improve traffic flow and create a safer drop-off for the preschool area. So the church has spent the past couple of years raising funds for this addition, and when they were ready to move forward, they contacted us, and we pretty quickly contacted Marcus about the next steps for applying for the special use permit. As he said, when the church was originally constructed, it was allowed by right in this area, but since then the neighborhood has been rezoned. And Marcus recommended that the church hold a neighborhood meeting. The church quickly mailed out flyers to all the neighbors with a description of the project and some site images. And we held that neighborhood meeting on February 18th. And after that meeting, we met with the building committee and revised the site plan based on questions and concerns that we heard from the neighbors. And the church mailed out that revised site plan quickly after that. They should have hopefully, the neighbors should have hopefully received that earlier this week. So I was going to talk through the site plan, but I think Marcus did a pretty thorough job of that. So I'll just say that we're still at the very early stages of design. We have several months of development to go through still, but it is our every intention to meet all zoning requirements, and we'll continue to work with the city to make sure we're doing so. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? I did believe Ms. Billman had one in regard to the trees.
Yes, so we are still waiting to get the existing survey completed with the exact location of those trees. We would love to preserve as many trees as possible, but there is some question about the quality of the trees right now. Some of them may need to come down just because they're dying. But we are going to be preserving some of the trees that are just to the northeast of the existing sanctuary. And then we're going to try to preserve the one that's all the way in the southeast corner of the lot.
Great. Ms. Billman, does that address your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Are there any further questions at this time? No? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Does anybody wish to address the Plan Commission who is in favor of this petition? Please I think you could unmute yourself, or we can get you unmuted if needed. Looks like everybody is muted. So I'm going to say that among the people who are on this call who haven't already addressed the commission, there's nobody else who wishes to address the commission at this time. So with that, I will end the public input portion of this, and thank you very much to all. And let's have a discussion. Is there anybody have thoughts about this proposal? Looks pretty quiet out there. Ms. Billman.
Well, yeah, I had a question. On these, we usually get a more detailed architectural plans. And I don't know if that's important, but Ms. Riestack mentioned that they're still in a preliminary design phase. So I'm unclear how we approve something that we don't have more detail on. Does that matter?
Well, somewhat, yes. So I think that the key is that one of the conditions is that it has to be in general conformity with the site plan. So if in finishing off the design, it becomes not significantly in conformance, then they would have to come back. And presumably, if that happens, their plans would be much more detailed at that time. Is that fair, Mr. Ricci?
Yes, that's fair. A couple of comments are they have laid out the footprint for the new proposed fellowship hall. So that would be tied to this site plan. They're calling for 6,540 square feet so that you know it's going to be that size at that location. It is showing the size and configuration of the parking lot and the access drives and egresses. The special use permit is to allow a church in this district. I'm not sure if it's the purview of the Plan Commission to be reviewing floor plans to talk about how the church itself is going to be designed, because any legitimate church activity would be included in allowing the church use. They have stated that no changes to service times or daycare activities or any other church activities are planned, and they're not expecting any increases in congregation size or school enrollment. I don't know how much more information having the floor layout of the building would provide for the Plan Commission to make its decision if they want to see a church in the location or not. I guess that's my planner response.
Yeah, as part of a special use permit, we have some purview to say that we want the site to be a certain way, that we want to regulate the uses. I'm looking at the staff memo now. We could ask for landscaping and screening. So we do have a lot of latitude in the area, a lot of purview to be able to ask for certain changes if there's something about the design that we feel strongly enough to ask for changes about. That's the way I read it.
And I absolutely agree with that. And I think they've shown the landscaping on the site plan.
They have indeed. Ms. Billman?
I just didn't know how, and Mr. Fell, you would know how to answer this, how much they can determine the exterior of the plan will be without knowing what's going to be on the inside.
Yeah, I was deciding on whether I was going to weigh in here or not. The reality of a building like this, I can't speak specifically for this building. I can tell you in general that they're probably far enough along with the plan of their building that they have the parameters of what they're doing nailed down, and it takes, depending on the building type, it can take a very long time to get from the stage of knowing what the footprint of your building is to being done with the drawings. And for instance, in this case, again, I have no idea if this is true in this building or not, but since they don't have a public health approved kitchen, I'm assuming they're probably putting a kitchen in here. And in the process of designing a commercial kitchen, they probably have a box in the building that this kitchen fits in, but it takes several months to go through the process with a kitchen supplier and a equipment supplier and figuring out your equipment and laying just the kitchen out. So it can be a very long process between the point of determining what the footprint of your building is to being done with it enough to present it to get a building permit. Does that help?
Thank you, Mr. Fell. Anything else? Any other thoughts or concerns? Mr. Allred.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that it seems to make sense to me. I mean, I think what we're really looking at with a special use is thinking about how the impacts of a use that are different from the surrounding uses, which is mostly residential in the school, are being mitigated. And I think a lot of the specifics in terms of where things are located on the site, as well as the screening that they've made and the locations of the drives, the entry and exit points, I think they've made a good attempt to address those concerns. So
Good, thank you. Any further comments? Are we ready for a motion?
I'll give it a whirl. I make a motion that we move plan case number 2415-SU-21 to the City Council with the recommendation of approval with the conditions set forth by staff.
Great. Motion by Mr. Fell, second by Ms. Billman. Any further discussion? Mr. Keene, I see you have your hand up, but we're really...
Could I make one just brief comment? As far as the exterior, that certainly was taken into account, and maybe Chuck or Elsa would like to address that. But it will be a brick structure, very attractive from Florida, with several large windows. So that definitely has been part of the plan.
Okay, thank you. That is actually, the exterior of the building is not actually something that we have purview over in this case. But I appreciate the fact that it's an attractive building now, and I presume it'll be even more attractive. So thank you for that. So we had a motion and a second. Is there anything further? In that case, can we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Ms. Billman,
Yes.
Mr. Fell,
Yes?
Mr. Allred,
yes.
and Mr. Fitch.
Yes. That motion passes. So do we have a date for when the council will take it up?
So this will actually go to committee of the whole because it is a special use permit with significant construction going on. Let's see, that will go to committee of the whole on March 15th and then go to city council for a vote as early as March 22nd.
Great. Thank you. All right. Thanks to everyone for that. And I appreciate the testimony and all the good commentary. So now we have no new business. Audience participation. Is there anyone on the call who wishes to address the Plan Commission on a subject of their choosing? If so, you will have 5 minutes uninterrupted to do so. Okay, I see everybody's still muted. So I'm going to say that we will not have any audience participation tonight. Staff report. Do we have a staff report? Mr. Fell, you,
A question? I'm not sure when to ask, though.
well, you put your hand up, but
Question for staff. I understand that the PUD case on Lincoln Avenue went to council and it was perhaps a little more exciting than we thought it might be. Can you fill us in? I didn't see it. I just wondered what happened. I mean, I don't know what even the result of the city council action was.
There was no result of city council action. It went back to committee of the whole this past Monday. I was also not at the meeting, but it will go to city council this coming Monday for a vote.
Okay.
good question. I was wondering that myself. Any other staff report items?
No.
Okay, great, thanks. We don't have a study session, therefore we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Adjourned at 7:49.
Well, let me check it. We seem to be in different time zones. 7:49.